Dr. Sarah Chun adjusted her field research equipment one more time, checking the xenobiology scanners mounted on her pack. The dense jungle of Kepler 442c stretched endlessly in every direction, its twin suns casting strange purple shadows through the canopy above. She had been studying the ecosystem here for 6 months, documenting species that defied everything humans thought they knew about evolutionary biology. The Galactic Council had assigned her this remote posting after her controversial paper on predator-prey relationships had caused an uproar among the scientific community. Most alien species viewed humans as soft, weak creatures who had somehow stumbled into space travel despite lacking any real survival instincts. They thought her theories about human adaptability were nothing more than wishful thinking. Sarah pushed through a curtain of vine-like organisms that seemed to recoil from her touch. Her universal translator crackled with static, picking up the complex chemical communications of the local fauna. Most of the sounds registered as warnings, territorial claims, or hunting calls. This world was dangerous in ways that made Earth's most hostile environments seem like children's playgrounds. A rustling in the undergrowth made her freeze. Through her scanner's display, she detected movement about 30 meters ahead. The heat signatures were small, but numerous, moving in coordinated patterns that suggested pack behavior. Sarah crouched low, activating her camouflage field generator. The device would mask her human scent and thermal signature, making her nearly invisible to most alien senses. The creatures emerged from the dense foliage, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. They were unlike anything in her extensive xenobiology database. Each one stood about knee-high, covered in iridescent fur that shifted colors with their movements. Their heads were elongated, featuring large eyes that seemed to take in everything around them. Most striking were their limbs, which appeared to shift between different configurations depending on their needs. Her scanner identified them as juveniles of an unknown species. The data streams showed muscle density readings that made no sense. These small creatures registered strength levels that should have belonged to animals 10 times their size. Their bone structure defied conventional understanding, appearing both delicate and incredibly dense simultaneously. The pack of young predators moved with fluid precision through the jungle. Sarah watched as one of them effortlessly climbed a vertical rock face that would have challenged an experienced human mountaineer. Another leaped between trees with grace that made Earth's most agile primates look clumsy. They were clearly hunting, their movements coordinated in ways that suggested high intelligence. Sarah began recording everything, her equipment capturing movement patterns, social behaviors, and environmental interactions. This discovery could revolutionize understanding of predator development in high-gravity worlds. The implications for evolutionary biology were staggering. One of the cubs suddenly stopped and turned in her direction. Its large eyes seemed to look right through her camouflage field. Sarah remained perfectly still, knowing that movement would give her away regardless of technological concealment. The creature tilted its head, studying the area where she hid. The other cubs gathered around their companion, their body language suggesting curiosity rather than alarm. They began to communicate through a series of soft chirps and trills that her translator couldn't process. The sounds were too complex, layered with harmonics that suggested multiple levels of meaning. To her amazement, the lead cub began approaching her position. Its movements were careful and deliberate, showing none of the aggression she expected from a predator. The creature stopped just a few feet away and sat down, watching her with those enormous eyes. Sarah realized her camouflage had failed completely. These beings could detect her through methods her technology couldn't mask. Yet they showed no fear or hostility. Instead, they seemed genuinely curious about this strange visitor to their territory. The lead cub made a soft sound and extended one of its limbs toward her. The appendage had reconfigured itself into something resembling a hand, complete with opposable digits. The gesture was unmistakably peaceful, an invitation rather than a threat. Against every protocol she had been taught, Sarah slowly deactivated her camouflage field. The cubs reacted with excited chirps, their fur shifting to brighter colors. They had known she was there all along and had been trying to communicate with her. She carefully removed her field pack and set it aside, moving slowly to avoid startling them. The cubs responded by moving closer, their body language relaxed and playful. One of them approached her pack and began examining it with obvious intelligence, its limbs shifting to better manipulate the various instruments. Sarah reached into her personal kit and withdrew her hairbrush, a simple tool she used each morning as part of her routine. The cubs immediately focused on the object with intense interest. Their large eyes tracked every movement as she demonstrated its use by running it through her long black hair. The lead cub made a series of excited sounds and approached even closer. It extended a limb and gently touched her hair, then pointed at the brush. The meaning was clear despite the language barrier. The creature wanted to try the grooming tool. Sarah hesitated for a moment, considering the implications. First contact protocols were strict about sharing human technology, even something as simple as a hairbrush. But these weren't adult members of a spacefaring civilization. They were children, curious and playful, showing trust that touched something deep in her maternal instincts. She made her decision and offered the brush to the lead cub. The creature accepted it carefully, its limbs adapting to hold the tool properly. It began experimenting with the brush, first on its own fur, then on its companions. The other cubs lined up eagerly for their turn, creating an impromptu grooming session that filled the air with content purring sounds. The brush worked remarkably well on their iridescent fur, causing it to shine and shift colors even more dramatically. The cubs were delighted with the results, taking turns and carefully sharing the tool among the group. Their behavior reminded Sarah of human children with a new toy, full of wonder and excitement. As the grooming session continued, more sounds emerged from the jungle around them. Sarah's scanner detected additional movement in the canopy above. The cubs noticed too, their ears perking up and their posture shifting slightly. They weren't alarmed, but they were clearly aware of approaching presences. Through the foliage came larger versions of the same species, obviously the adults of the pack. These creatures were magnificent, standing nearly as tall as Sarah herself. Their fur patterns were more complex, displaying intricate designs that seemed to shift and change with their emotions. Their limbs showed even greater adaptability, reconfiguring themselves for different purposes with fluid ease. The adult predators observed the scene with expressions that Sarah could only interpret as surprise. Their young were interacting peacefully with an alien creature, sharing in an activity that clearly brought them joy. The adults approached slowly, their movements careful and non-threatening. One of the adults, larger than the others and bearing distinctive markings that suggested leadership status, came forward to investigate. It examined the brush and watched as its offspring continued their grooming activities. The creature's eyes met Sarah's, and she saw intelligence there that rivaled any she had encountered among the galaxy's recognized sentient species. The adult leader made a complex series of sounds that caused the cubs to look up expectantly. After a brief exchange, the young ones reluctantly returned the brush to Sarah. She could see disappointment in their body language, but also respect for their elders' authority. Sarah had an idea. She reached into her pack and withdrew her spare grooming kit, which contained several different brushes and combs. She arranged them on the ground and gestured for the cubs to examine them. Their excitement was immediate and infectious, drawing amused sounds from the watching adults. The lead adult observed this interaction with growing interest. When Sarah offered to demonstrate different grooming techniques, the creature settled down to watch more closely. Soon, the entire pack was gathered around, creating an unlikely scene of interspecies cooperation in the heart of an alien jungle. As Sarah worked with the cubs, teaching them how different tools worked best for different areas of their fur, she began to notice something remarkable. The young predators weren't just learning to use the tools. They were improving them. Their adaptive limbs allowed them to modify their grip and technique in ways that made the brushes more effective than they had ever been in human hands. The cubs began experimenting with combining tools, using multiple brushes simultaneously to achieve complex grooming patterns. They communicated with each other through subtle color changes in their fur, coordinating their efforts to help each other reach difficult spots. Their innovation and cooperation impressed even their elders, who began participating more actively in the grooming activities. Hours passed unnoticed as Sarah found herself integrated into the pack's social structure. The grooming session had evolved into something resembling a cultural exchange, with both species learning from each other. The cubs taught her about their color communication system, while she showed them new ways to care for their remarkable fur. The adult leader approached Sarah directly as the day began to wane. The creature's limbs reconfigured into a pattern that seemed designed for delicate manipulation. It gently touched her hair, then indicated its own fur. The message was clear. It wanted to try grooming her in return. Sarah agreed, curious about how their methods might differ from human techniques. The creature's touch was incredibly gentle, its adaptive fingers working through her hair with a precision that no human could match. The grooming was relaxing in a way she hadn't expected, creating a sense of trust and connection that transcended species barriers. As the sun began to set, casting the jungle in deep shadows, the pack started to show signs of preparing to move on. The cubs reluctantly began to gather around their elders, though they kept looking back at Sarah and the grooming tools with obvious longing. The pack leader made a series of sounds that seemed to be directed at Sarah. Though her translator couldn't process the meaning, the tone suggested gratitude and farewell. The creature gathered its young and began moving deeper into the jungle, their forms quickly disappearing into the dense vegetation. Sarah packed her equipment slowly, processing everything that had happened. She had made contact with a previously unknown species, one that showed remarkable intelligence and social complexity. The grooming session had created a bond of trust that challenged everything the Galactic Council believed about first contact protocols. Her recordings would provide unprecedented insights into predator social behavior and adaptive evolution. But more than that, she had experienced something that felt profoundly important. These creatures had accepted her not as a threat or a curiosity, but as a fellow being worthy of trust and friendship. As she prepared to return to her research station, Sarah noticed something glinting in the fading light. One of the cubs had left behind a small object, carefully placed where she would be sure to find it. It was a piece of their fur, woven into an intricate pattern that seemed to capture and reflect light in mesmerizing ways. The gift was beautiful, but its implications were staggering. The cubs had not only learned to use her tools, but had created something entirely new in return. They had taken the concept of grooming and elevated it into art, showing creative intelligence that rivaled the greatest achievements of galactic civilization. Sarah carefully secured the woven fur sample and began her trek back through the darkening jungle. Tomorrow, she would need to decide how to report this encounter to the Galactic Council. The discovery of a new sentient species would change everything, particularly one that showed such remarkable adaptability and intelligence. Behind her, she could hear the distant sounds of the pack moving through their territory. The cubs' excited chirps echoed through the trees, suggesting they were still discussing their encounter with the strange alien visitor. Sarah smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of something that would transform human understanding of intelligence, cooperation, and the true meaning of civilization. The simple act of sharing a hairbrush had opened doorways between species that might otherwise have taken decades to discover. It proved that sometimes the most profound connections came not from advanced technology or complex diplomacy, but from the simple recognition of shared experiences and mutual curiosity. As the jungle settled into its nocturnal rhythms around her, Sarah began planning her next steps. She would need to document everything carefully, prepare her reports, and decide how to approach what might be the most significant first contact in human history. But first, she would return to her station and begin preparing for what she hoped would be many more encounters with these remarkable creatures. 3 days had passed since Sarah's encounter with the pack, and she couldn't concentrate on her regular research duties. Every xenobiology scan seemed insignificant compared to what she had discovered. The woven fur sample sat in her analysis chamber, revealing properties that defied explanation. The material was stronger than most synthetic fibers while remaining incredibly soft and flexible. Her research station's communication array had been acting strangely since her return. The usual background chatter from orbital monitoring stations was intermixed with new signals that her equipment couldn't decode. The patterns were too complex and too organized to be natural phenomena. Something was trying to communicate. Sarah was adjusting her receivers when movement outside caught her attention. Through the reinforced windows of her habitat, she could see shapes moving through the tree line. The distinctive color-shifting fur was unmistakable. The pack had returned, and this time they had brought friends. At least 20 of the creatures emerged from the jungle, ranging from small cubs to magnificent adults that stood taller than Sarah herself. They moved with purpose, carrying objects that made her equipment readings spike with electromagnetic activity. These weren't simple tools. They were technology. The pack leader from her previous encounter approached the station's perimeter and began making complex gestures with its adaptive limbs. The movements seemed ritualized, possibly a formal greeting or request for permission to approach. Sarah activated her external speakers and tried various welcoming phrases from her Universal Translators database. The response was immediate and unexpected. The creatures began generating harmonized sounds that bypassed her translator entirely and interfaced directly with her communication equipment. Her displays lit up with data streams as the alien signals integrated with her systems. They weren't just communicating. They were upgrading her technology in real time. Sarah watched in amazement as her crude translation software evolved before her eyes. The aliens were teaching her equipment their language by directly modifying its programming. Within minutes, her screens displayed complex ideographic symbols that somehow conveyed meaning more precisely than any verbal language she knew. The lead adult's message appeared on her display. Grooming teacher Sarah Human. We bring pack gift learning. You share brush tool knowledge. We share adaptation creation knowledge. Fair exchange growth. The implications hit her like a lightning bolt. These creatures had spent 3 days reverse engineering the concept of her hairbrush and had developed advanced technology based on its principles. They weren't just intelligent. They were innovators on a scale that made human technological development look glacially slow. Sarah activated her habitat's external airlock and stepped outside, carrying her grooming kit as a gesture of good faith. The pack received her with excited color displays rippling through their fur. The cubs from her previous encounter rushed forward, their joy at seeing her again obvious in every movement. The pack leader approached carrying a device that resembled her hairbrush, but was clearly far more advanced. The tool seemed to be made from the same material as the woven fur sample, but it shifted and adapted its shape as she watched. It was a brush that could reconfigure itself for any type of grooming task imaginable. Through her upgraded translator, the pack leader explained their creation. Brush tool concept inspired adaptation principle discovery. We create tool that learns user needs. Tool grows with grooming task requirements. Your simple idea became complex innovation reality. Sarah accepted the gift with trembling hands. The brush felt warm and seemed to pulse gently with some form of internal energy. When she tested it on her own hair, the tool automatically adjusted its bristle pattern, spacing, and pressure to provide the perfect grooming experience. It was unlike anything human technology had achieved. But this was only the beginning. Other pack members began presenting their own innovations. One had created a grooming tool that could clean and repair damaged fur at the cellular level. Another had developed a device that could analyze fur health and recommend specific grooming patterns for optimal conditioning. The cubs had been busy too. They presented Sarah with a collection of miniature tools designed specifically for intricate detail work. Each tool was a masterpiece of engineering, incorporating principles of adaptive robotics that human scientists were still trying to understand. As the demonstration continued, Sarah realized the full scope of what was happening. These creatures hadn't just improved her simple hairbrush. They had used it as inspiration for an entire technological revolution. The grooming tools were just the beginning. In the background, she could see larger devices that seemed designed for purposes far beyond personal care. One of the younger adults approached with something that looked like a medical scanner crossed with a grooming tool. Through the translator, it explained its function. Fur care device revealed health monitoring possibilities. We create tool that grooms and diagnoses simultaneously. Your brush concept led to medical breakthrough innovation. Sarah's scientific mind raced with the implications. These beings had taken a simple grooming tool and extrapolated principles that led to advances in medicine, materials science, and adaptive engineering. Their rate of technological development was beyond anything recorded in galactic civilization. The pack leader gestured toward the larger devices visible in the tree line. Adaptation principle application extends beyond grooming care activities. We create building materials that adapt, transportation devices that reconfigure, communication systems that evolve, all from brush tool inspiration source. Sarah followed the group deeper into their territory, her equipment recording everything. What she saw there challenged every assumption about technological development. The pack's settlement wasn't built from traditional materials. Instead, it grew from living structures that could reshape themselves based on need. Buildings that could expand or contract based on occupancy. Bridges that could extend across any gap. Storage systems that organized themselves automatically. The technology was seamlessly integrated with the natural environment. Nothing looked artificial or imposed. Instead, every structure seemed to be a natural extension of the jungle itself, as if the technology and ecosystem had evolved together in perfect harmony. A group of cubs demonstrated their latest creation, a grooming device designed for maintaining the living structures. The tool could repair damage, encourage growth in specific directions, and even upgrade existing systems with new capabilities. They had turned maintenance into a form of technological evolution. Sarah watched as they worked, their adaptive limbs allowing them to interface with their technology in ways that seemed almost telepathic. Tools responded to their intentions before conscious commands were given. The relationship between user and device was so seamless that it was difficult to tell where biological capability ended and technological augmentation began. The pack leader brought her to what appeared to be their central research facility, a living building that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Inside, dozens of creatures worked on projects that expanded the grooming tool concept in directions Sarah couldn't have imagined. One team had developed grooming tools for other species, devices that could adapt to any creature's specific needs and biology. Another group was working on tools that could groom at the molecular level, rearranging matter itself to achieve perfect results. A third team had created grooming devices for their technology, tools that could maintain and improve their living structures. Through her translator, various pack members explained their work. Each project built upon the simple principle she had demonstrated with her hairbrush. But they had extrapolated those concepts into realms of science that human civilization had barely begun to explore. Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Most species developed technology gradually, building upon previous innovations over thousands of years. But these creatures could take a single concept and expand it into entire technological paradigms within days. Their secret seemed to be their adaptive nature itself. Just as their limbs could reconfigure for any task, their minds could reshape concepts and ideas to find applications that other species would never consider. They didn't just use tools. They became one with them, understanding their potential in ways that transcended normal engineering approaches. The implications for human technology were staggering. If these beings could help humanity understand their adaptive principles, it could accelerate human development by millennia. Medical devices that could evolve with their patients, spacecraft that